March 2, 2026. A rural courthouse in Pictou, Nova Scotia, Canada. Daniel Martell, 34 years old, stands before a judge facing charges of sexual assault, and forcible confinement. The courtroom is packed. Outside, protesters gather holding signs demanding answers. Justice for Jack and Lily. Where are Jack and Lily? If they are not in the woods, where are they? When reporters ask Martell if the charges are connected to the disappearance of his two stepchildren, 6-year-old Lily Sullivan and 5-year-old Jack Sullivan, he refuses to answer most questions. He strides quickly toward his car, his voice raised in frustration. I just said they're not related. But the questions remain, because Lily and Jack have been missing for 10 months, vanished from their rural home in the early morning hours of May 2nd, 2025. Despite one of the most intensive searches in Canadian history, only 2 pieces of evidence have been found. A pink blanket belonging to Lily, found hanging in a tree 1 kilometer from the home, and a single child-sized boot print. No bodies, no witnesses, no clear answers, and now their stepfather, who reported them missing alongside their mother, is facing serious criminal charges involving an adult victim. Charges that the Royal Canadian Mounted Police have stated are not directly related to the children's disappearance, but which occurred during the same period the children were living in his home. This is the story of Lily and Jack Sullivan, 2 young siblings who disappeared from a house surrounded by dense woods in one of the most isolated regions of Nova Scotia. A case that has gripped Canada and captured international attention. 10 months of searching, over 1,000 tips from the public, cadaver dogs covering a 40-kilometer radius, helicopters with thermal imaging, polygraph tests administered to multiple individuals. Unsealed court documents revealing troubling allegations of domestic violence. And still, no trace of 2 young children who should be in school, playing with friends, experiencing childhood. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police say they are evaluating all scenarios, including criminality. But as of today, they have not declared this a criminal investigation. They have not named any suspects. And they have not found Lily and Jack Sullivan. Before we dive deeper into this investigation, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Here at Forensic Disconnect, we unlock the cases that deserve to be remembered. New investigations every week. Lily Sullivan was born in March of 2019. Jack Sullivan was born on October 29, 2020. They were siblings, the biological children of Malahia Brooks Murray and Cody Sullivan. By the time Lily was 4 and Jack was 2, their parents were no longer together. Court documents that were partially unsealed in January of 2026 indicate that Cody Sullivan had not seen his children in several years prior to their disappearance. The reasons for this estrangement are not fully detailed in public records, though documents note that Cody had been paying child support until he lost his job approximately 9 months before the children vanished. What is clear from the record is that Lily and Jack were living primarily with their mother, Malahia Brooks Murray, and that Cody was not part of their day-to-day lives. In August of 2023, Malahia Brooks Murray made a significant move. She relocated with Lily and Jack to Lansdowne Station, a rural hamlet in Pictou County, Nova Scotia. Lansdowne Station is remote in every sense of the word. It is the kind of place where houses are separated by acres of forest, where the nearest neighbor might be far enough away that a scream would not be heard, where thick brush, steep embankments, and dense woods surround properties. The population is sparse. The sense of isolation is profound. Malahia moved onto a property on Gairloch Road, a property owned by a woman named Janie Mackenzie. Janie's son, Daniel Martell, also lived on the property in a separate residence. It was there, in that isolated rural setting, that Malahia and Daniel began a romantic relationship. By all accounts from people who knew them at the time, the relationship between Malahia and Daniel appeared to be a fairly typical common-law partnership. They lived together. They had arguments, as couples do. They had moments of happiness and moments of tension. In early 2024, Malahia gave birth to another child, a baby daughter, fathered by Daniel Martell. The household on Gairloch Road now consisted of 5 people. Malahia Brooks Murray, the mother, Daniel Martell, the stepfather to Lily and Jack and the biological father to the baby, Lily, 6 years old, Jack, 4 years old, and their baby half-sister. They lived together in a mobile home on the property owned by Daniel's mother, Janie Mackenzie, who resided in a small recreational vehicle nearby. Neighbors and those familiar with the area have described the property as extremely isolated. Dense woods surrounded the home on all sides. The terrain was difficult. Thick underbrush limited visibility to just a few feet in many areas. Steep banks and rocky ground made walking treacherous. It was not the kind of place where young children could easily wander off and be quickly found, because the environment itself was hostile to searching. But it was also not the kind of place where strangers frequently passed by. The rural nature of the location meant that anyone approaching the property would likely be noticed, unless they knew the area intimately or had a specific reason to be there. Lily was 6 years old in the spring of 2025. She was described by those who knew her as a sweet, gentle child. She loved the color pink. She carried a pink blanket with her, a comfort item that gave her a sense of security. Jack was 4 years old, energetic and curious the way young boys often are. Both children attended school in the area when they were not kept home. They had routines. They had a life that, from the outside, appeared normal. And then, on May 2nd, 2025, everything changed. The timeline of events leading up to their disappearance is documented in police reports, court filings, and public statements. On April 30th, 2025, which was a Wednesday, there was no school for Lily and Jack. It was a professional development day for teachers, a common occurrence in the Canadian school system. That evening, the entire family went grocery shopping together. Malaya, Daniel, Lily, Jack, and the baby all traveled to a store. According to police records, they returned home by 10:19 p.m. The next day, May 1st, was a Thursday. According to Daniel Martell's statement to police, both Lily and Jack were kept home from school that day. His explanation was that Lily had a cough. Whether this was a legitimate illness or some other reason is unknown, but the fact remains that the children did not attend school on May 1st. During the afternoon of May 1st, the family made a trip to nearby New Glasgow, a town approximately 30 minutes away from Lansdowne station. At 2:25 p.m., security cameras at a Dollarama store captured footage of the entire family together. Malaya Brooks Murray, Daniel Martell, their baby daughter, and Lily and Jack were all clearly visible on the surveillance video. This footage would become critically important to the investigation because it represents the last confirmed sighting of Lily and Jack in a public place. They were alive, they were with their family, and they appeared, at least on camera, to be fine. The family returned home that evening. What happened next is based almost entirely on statements given by Malaya Brooks Murray and Daniel Martell to investigators. According to their account, the evening of May 1st was uneventful. The family had dinner. The children played. As evening turned to night, everyone went to bed. Malaya and Daniel slept in their bedroom with their baby daughter in the bed with them or nearby. Lily and Jack slept in their own rooms. The house grew quiet. And then came the morning of May 2nd, a morning that would change everything. Daniel Martell's mother, Janie Mackenzie, lived in a separate structure on the same property, a small recreational vehicle parked not far from the mobile home where Malaya, Daniel, and the children resided. On the morning of May 2nd, Janie Mackenzie would later tell police she woke up around 8:30 or 8:45 in the morning. She was tired, and she dozed off again. But before she fell back asleep, she heard something. She heard the sound of children playing outside. She heard laughter. She heard the creaking of swings in the backyard, the kind of sound that wooden playground equipment makes when children are using it. She believed, and would later state to investigators, that the voices and sounds she heard were those of Lily and Jack. She heard them playing. She heard them laughing. And then she fell back asleep. When she woke up later, the children were gone. This statement from Janie Mackenzie is significant because it suggests that Lily and Jack were alive and outside the home as late as approximately 8:50 a.m. on May 2nd. It is the last time anyone other than their mother and stepfather claims to have any indication that the children were present and alive. At some point during the morning, Malaya and Daniel woke up. According to their statements to police, they realized that Lily and Jack were not in their rooms. They searched the house. The children were not inside. They went outside and began searching the property, calling out the children's names. Malaya later told investigators that she and Daniel looked around the immediate area, yelling for Lily and Jack. Daniel told police that while searching in the forest that surrounded the property, he thought he heard a scream. It sounded like it could have been one of the children. But then, he said, a helicopter flew overhead, and the noise from the helicopter made it impossible to hear anything further. This detail about the helicopter would later be questioned by some observers and investigators. Was there actually a helicopter in the area at that time? If so, what was it doing there? If not, what did Daniel Martell actually hear and why did he mention a helicopter? At 10:01 a.m. on May 2nd, 2025, Malaya Brooks Murray called 911. The call was recorded, as all emergency calls are, though the contents have not been made fully public. What is known is that Malahia reported to the dispatcher that her 2 children, Lily and Jack, had wandered away from the home. She explained that she and Daniel had been sleeping with their baby, and when they woke up, the children were gone. The dispatcher immediately initiated an emergency response. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police were notified. Ground search and rescue teams were mobilized. Volunteers from the local community began to gather. And within hours, what would become one of the most extensive searches in Nova Scotia history was underway. The response was swift and massive. Within hours of the 911 call, over 100 ground search and rescue volunteers were combing through the woods surrounding the property. Multiple service dogs trained in locating missing persons were deployed. Drones equipped with cameras flew overhead, scanning the terrain from above. Helicopters, some equipped with thermal imaging technology capable of detecting body heat even through tree cover, circled the area. The initial search area covered 8.5 square kilometers, an enormous expanse of mostly dense forest. Search teams worked through thick underbrush, navigating steep terrain and limited visibility. They called out the children's names over and over. They used every tool at their disposal, and they found almost nothing. On May 2nd at 12:25 p.m., just over 2 hours after the 911 call, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police issued a public statement. They notified the public about the disappearance of Lily and Jack Sullivan and asked anyone with information to come forward. At that time, police stated their belief that the children had wandered away from the home. There was no evidence of abduction, they said. The working theory was that 2 young children had walked into the woods and become lost. By 4:55 p.m. that same day, police issued another update. A vulnerable missing persons advisory had been issued for Pictou County. The public was asked to stay clear of the search area so that professional search teams could work effectively without interference. The search continued through the night of May 2nd and into May 3rd. Volunteers walked grid patterns through the woods, ensuring that every section of the search area was covered systematically. Search dogs followed potential scent trails, though the trails were faint and difficult to track. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging cameras flew low over the forest canopy, scanning for any heat signatures that might indicate the presence of 2 small children. Drones captured thousands of images of the terrain, which were then analyzed by investigators looking for any sign of the missing children. Every structure on the property, every outbuilding, every vehicle was searched and searched again, and still, there was nothing. No trace of Lily and Jack. In the early hours of May 3rd at approximately 12:45 a.m., Malaya Brooks Murray made another call to police. This time, her report was different. She told investigators that she believed Cody Sullivan, the biological father of Lily and Jack, may have taken the children. She suggested that he might have crossed the border into New Brunswick, a neighboring province. This allegation immediately shifted part of the investigation's focus. Police began investigating whether Cody Sullivan had any involvement in the disappearance. They traveled to his home and interviewed him at 2:50 a.m. They checked his whereabouts on May 1st and May 2nd. They examined his phone records, his financial transactions, his vehicle. They requested footage from the Cobequid Pass, a toll plaza on the Trans-Canada Highway that would have been on the route to New Brunswick, and they found nothing to support the allegation. Cody Sullivan had not taken his children. According to his own statement to police, he had not seen Lily and Jack in 3 years. The suggestion that he had abducted them appeared to be unfounded. As the days passed and the search continued, the RCMP brought in additional resources. By May 4th, the number of people actively searching had grown to 160. The search area continued to expand as investigators considered the possibility that the children might have traveled farther than initially believed. And then came a grim development. Cadaver dogs were deployed. Cadaver dogs are specially trained to detect the scent of human remains, of decomposing tissue. Their use in a search operation signals that authorities are preparing for the possibility that the missing persons are deceased. In the case of Lily and Jack, cadaver dogs were brought in relatively early, a decision that suggested investigators were not entirely confident the children would be found alive. The dogs searched the woods, the property, nearby water sources, abandoned structures in the area. They covered extensive ground, and they found nothing, no indication of human remains. No alert from the dogs to suggest that Lily and Jack's bodies were in the areas that were searched. This was both hopeful and confusing. Hopeful because it meant the children might still be alive. Confusing because if they were not in the woods, if they had not died in the woods, then where were they? By May 7th, 5 days after the disappearance, the large-scale search effort was scaled back. This is a standard procedure in missing persons cases. The initial intensive search, involving hundreds of volunteers and extensive resources, is maintained for as long as it is deemed productive. But when days pass without results, when every likely area has been searched multiple times, when the probability of finding the missing persons alive in the search area has diminished, resources must be reallocated. The scaling back of the search did not mean that the investigation was ending or that authorities were giving up. It meant that the approach was changing, transitioning from a massive physical search to a more targeted investigative effort focused on interviews, evidence analysis, and following up on tips from the public. Police began conducting extensive interviews. They spoke to family members, friends, neighbors, teachers, anyone who had been in contact with Lily, Jack, Malehaya, or Daniel in the weeks and months leading up to the disappearance. They asked detailed questions about the household dynamics, about the children's behavior, about any recent changes or concerns. Between May 16th and July 16th of 2025, the RCMP sought and obtained 12 separate search warrants. These warrants allowed investigators to seize items from the property, to review electronic communications including text messages and emails, to access financial records, and to gather any evidence that might shed light on what happened to the children. On May 28th, the RCMP made a public disclosure that would prove important. They announced that Lily and Jack had been confirmed to be observed in public with family members on May 1st, the day before they were reported missing. This was the Dollarama surveillance footage. The disclosure established a clear timeline. Lily and Jack were definitively alive and with their family at 2:25 p.m. on May 1st. Approximately 19 and a half hours later, they were reported missing. What happened during those 19 and a half hours? That became one of the central questions driving the investigation. As the investigation progressed through the summer of 2025, police began to focus more intently on the household itself. They interviewed Malehia Brooks Murray multiple times, each interview probing deeper into the events of May 1st and May 2nd, into her relationship with Daniel, into the children's lives. They interviewed Daniel Martell multiple times as well, asking the same questions from different angles, looking for inconsistencies, trying to build a complete picture of what had happened. And they administered polygraph tests. Polygraph tests, commonly known as lie detector tests, are a controversial tool. They measure physiological responses such as heart rate, blood pressure, respiration, and skin conductivity, while a subject answers questions. The theory is that lying produces stress, and stress produces measurable physical responses. However, polygraphs are not foolproof. Some people can pass them while lying, others can fail them while telling the truth. For this reason, polygraph results are not admissible as evidence in Canadian courts, but they are used by investigators as an investigative tool, a way to assess whether someone's account is likely truthful and to identify areas that require further questioning. According to public statements from the RCMP, 7 polygraph tests were conducted in connection with the disappearance of Lily and Jack. The specific individuals who were tested have not all been publicly identified, and the results of those tests have not been disclosed. However, Daniel Martell publicly stated in a media interview that he volunteered to take a polygraph test early in the investigation. He told reporters that he wanted to clear his name, that he knew investigators would be looking at him because he was the stepfather, and that he wanted to prove he had nothing to hide. He described the questions he was asked during the polygraph as presuming the children were dead, questions such as whether he was an accessory to the murder of Lily and Jack. He stated that he was told by the examiner immediately after the test that he had passed. Whether Malehia Brooks Murray also took a polygraph test has not been publicly confirmed, though it would be unusual for investigators not to test the mother of missing children. As the weeks turned into months without any sign of Lily and Jack, the initial theory that the children had simply wandered into the woods and become lost began to seem less and less plausible. Extensive searches involving professional teams, trained dogs, helicopters, and drones had covered a 40-kilometer radius around the property. If the children had wandered off and succumbed to the elements or to an accident, it seemed almost impossible that no trace of them would have been found. Young children who get lost in the wilderness typically leave evidence behind. They disturb vegetation as they walk. They leave footprints in soft ground. They drop items. Their scent lingers in the air, detectable by trained search dogs. In this case, aside from 2 small pieces of evidence, there was nothing. The first piece of evidence was a pink blanket. Lily's pink blanket, the comfort item she carried with her, was found approximately 1 kilometer from the home. It was discovered hanging in a tree, not on the ground. This detail raised immediate questions. How did the blanket end up in a tree? If Lily had been carrying it while walking through the woods, would she have simply left it behind? A 6-year-old child with a favorite blanket typically clings to it, especially in a frightening or stressful situation. The fact that it was found in a tree rather than dropped on the ground suggested that it may have been placed there deliberately. But by whom and why? The second piece of evidence was a single child-sized boot print. A footprint consistent with the size of shoe that either Lily or Jack would have worn was found during the search. But there was only one. No trail of footprints leading away from the house. No series of steps indicating a path through the woods. Just one print, and then nothing. The presence of only a single footprint is difficult to explain if the children were walking through the area. In soft ground or in areas with loose soil, a child walking would leave multiple prints. The fact that there was only one suggests either that the ground conditions changed dramatically from one step to the next, making it impossible to leave further prints, or that something else happened. Perhaps the child was picked up after that single step. Perhaps the weather or the passage of time or the search efforts themselves disturbed other potential prints. By July of 2025, 2 months after the disappearance, the RCMP made a statement that surprised many observers. According to court documents that were later filed and then partially unsealed, as of July 16, 2025, investigators no longer considered the case to be criminal in nature. This was a significant and controversial determination. 2 young children had been missing for over 2 months. Extensive searches had turned up almost no evidence. The circumstances of their disappearance were unclear and troubling. And yet, the RCMP was stating that they did not have reasonable grounds to believe that a crime had been committed. This classification had important implications. Under Canadian law, a missing persons investigation can proceed under the Missing Persons Act, which allows police to seek court orders to obtain information and evidence even without reasonable grounds to believe a crime has occurred. However, if police determine that a crime has likely been committed, the investigation transitions to a criminal investigation, which opens up additional investigative powers and resources. The statement that the case was not considered criminal meant that as of mid-July 2025, investigators did not have sufficient evidence to conclude that Lily and Jack had been harmed by another person. The decision drew criticism from experts. Dr. Michael Arntfield, a criminologist and former police officer, expressed surprise that the investigation had not turned criminal. He noted that, in his experience, missing persons cases involving children are generally deemed suspicious and are treated as potential crimes if the children are not found within approximately 1 week. The fact that Lily and Jack had been missing for months without the case being classified as criminal was, in his view, unusual and potentially problematic. He suggested that investigators might be hesitant to point fingers without absolute certainty, a caution that, while understandable, might be hampering the investigation. But the RCMP maintained that the investigation was active and thorough. Behind the scenes, even as the case was not officially classified as criminal, investigators were continuing to pursue leads aggressively. They continued to conduct interviews, they continued to review evidence, they continued to analyze the thousands of hours of video footage that had been collected from trail cameras, dash cams, and security cameras in the area. They received over 1,000 tips from the public, each of which had to be assessed, investigated, and either followed up on or ruled out. The volume of information was enormous, and sorting through it required meticulous work. The case attracted significant media attention, both within Canada and internationally. The mystery of 2 young children vanishing without a trace from a rural property captured public interest. News outlets covered the story extensively. True crime forums and social media groups dedicated to the case attracted thousands of members. People shared news articles, discussed theories, and speculated about what might have happened. Some of this discussion was well-intentioned, driven by a genuine desire to help find the children or to support the family. But much of it veered into harmful territory. Daniel Martell, in particular, became the focus of intense online scrutiny and accusation. Because he was the stepfather, because he was the adult male in the home, because his account of events on the morning of May 2nd relied heavily on his own testimony, many people viewed him as the most likely person responsible for the children's disappearance. Online sleuths analyzed his media interviews frame by frame, looking for signs of deception in his body language or his word choices. They compared his statements for inconsistencies. They shared photos of him with captions calling him a murderer. Some even posted his address and encouraged others to harass him. This kind of online vigilante behavior, while driven by outrage and a desire for justice, can have serious consequences. It can interfere with official investigations. It can destroy the lives of people who may be innocent, and it violates fundamental legal principles such as the presumption of innocence. Daniel Martell responded to the online accusations by continuing to speak publicly. He gave interviews to multiple media outlets, including CBC News and Global News. He maintained his innocence. He said that he loved Lily and Jack, that he had treated them as his own children, and that he was devastated by their disappearance. He expressed frustration with the online accusations, saying that he was being painted as a monster simply because he was the stepfather. He said that people were judging him without knowing the facts. He expressed hope that the children were still alive and would be found. Malehia Brooks Murray, the children's mother, took a very different approach. She largely stayed out of the public eye. She gave one interview to CTV News on May 3rd, the day after the children disappeared, in which she expressed hope that they would be found and said she wanted them home. But after that initial interview, she did not speak to media again. Her mother later told reporters that police had advised the family not to speak to the press. Malehia's silence led to speculation. Some people wondered why she was not more visible, why she was not making public pleas for her children's return. Others suggested that her silence might indicate guilt or knowledge of what happened. But grief and trauma manifest differently in different people. Some people find catharsis in public expression. Others find it unbearable. Without knowing Malehia's state of mind or her reasons for remaining private, it is impossible and unfair to draw conclusions from her silence. The children's paternal grandmother, Belinda Gray, became one of the most vocal advocates for Lily and Jack. She is the mother of Cody Sullivan, the biological father. Although Cody had been estranged from his children for years, Belinda had not forgotten them. She spoke to media frequently. She called for a public inquiry into the circumstances surrounding the disappearance. She expressed frustration with the lack of answers and with what she perceived as failures in the system to protect the children. She said she wanted to know what had happened to her grandchildren. She wanted accountability. She wanted justice. Her pain was evident in every interview, a grandmother mourning children she had not seen in years, but never stopped caring about. And then, in January of 2026, 8 months after the children disappeared, the case took a dramatic and unexpected turn. Court documents that had been sealed as part of the investigation were partially unsealed after a legal application by media organizations, including the Globe and Mail and CBC News. These media outlets argued that the public had a right to know what was happening in a case of such significant public interest, and that transparency was important for accountability. The RCMP and the Crown opposed the release of some information, arguing that it could compromise the investigation or violate the privacy of individuals involved. The court ultimately decided to release some of the documents in redacted form, balancing the public interest in transparency against the need to protect the integrity of the investigation. The information contained in those unsealed documents was explosive. According to the court filings, during one of her interviews with RCMP major crime investigators, Malehia Brooks Murray was asked whether Daniel Martell had been physically abusive toward her during their relationship. Her response, as documented in the police reports, was that Daniel would try to block her, hold her down, and that on at least one occasion, he had pushed her. She also stated that Daniel would take her phone from her when she tried to call her mother, and that these incidents were sometimes physical and would cause her pain. These allegations painted a picture of a relationship that involved controlling behavior and domestic violence. Daniel Martell vehemently denied these allegations when contacted by media after the documents were unsealed. He told reporters that he had never physically abused Malehia. He described the allegations as part of a false narrative designed to make him appear evil in the eyes of the public. He said that he and Malehia had arguments like any couple, that they would raise their voices at each other, but that their disputes never became physical. He maintained that he had been completely honest and cooperative with police throughout the investigation. The court documents also included portions of statements that Martell had given to police during interviews, in which he told investigators that his relationship with Malehia was good overall, that they had normal ups and downs, but that there was no physical violence between them. The unsealed court documents provided other details as well. They revealed that Malehia and Daniel had been arguing about money in the period leading up to the children's disappearance. Financial stress is a common source of tension in relationships, and it can exacerbate other problems. The documents also discussed Cody Sullivan, noting that he had not seen Lily and Jack in several years and had stopped paying child support approximately 9 months before their disappearance after losing his job. Perhaps most significantly, the documents revealed that a provincial child protection social worker had visited the home at some point prior to the children's disappearance to investigate a report of suspected abuse or neglect. The documents do not provide full details about when this visit occurred, what prompted it, what the social worker observed, or what actions were taken as a result. But the fact that Child Protection Services had been involved suggests that there were concerns about the welfare of Lily and Jack before they vanished. The release of these documents sparked renewed public interest and media coverage. The allegations of domestic violence raised serious questions about the household environment in which Lily and Jack had been living. If there was violence between the adults in the home, what did that mean for the children? Were they safe? Were they witnesses to abuse? Could the domestic violence have escalated in some way that led to the children's disappearance? These were questions that investigators were undoubtedly pursuing, but publicly, the RCMP continued to provide limited information. And then, just 2 weeks after the court documents were unsealed, came another bombshell. On January 26, 2026, Daniel Martell was arrested. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police confirmed that he had been taken into custody by officers with the Pictou County Detachment at approximately 11:30 a.m. He was charged with 3 criminal offenses: sexual assault, and forcible confinement. The charges involved an adult complainant, and the identity of that complainant was protected by a publication ban, as is standard in Canadian law for victims of sexual offenses. The alleged crimes had taken place between September 1st, 2024, and March 30th, 2025. This time period was significant because it meant that at least some of the alleged offenses occurred while Lily and Jack were living in the home. The RCMP was quick to issue a clarification. They stated publicly that the charges against Daniel Martell were not directly related to the investigation into the disappearance of Lily and Jack. The charges involved an adult victim, not the children. But the timing and the nature of the charges were impossible to ignore. Sexual assault is a serious violent crime involving non-consensual sexual contact. Assault involves the intentional application of force to another person. Forcible confinement involves unlawfully restraining or detaining someone against their will. These are grave offenses, and they had allegedly been committed by Daniel Martell in the same household where 2 young children lived during the months leading up to and including the time when those children disappeared. Daniel Martell was released from custody after his arrest, but he was required to comply with certain conditions set by the court. He was scheduled to appear in Pictou Provincial Court on March 2, 2026. That court date arrived yesterday. Martell appeared before Justice Cameron McKean in a courtroom that was packed with members of the public and media. Outside the courthouse, a number of people had gathered, some holding signs seeking justice for Lily and Jack. Neon posters on the windows of a parked car read, "Justice for Jack and Lily. Where are Jack and Lily?" And "If they are not in the woods, where are they?" Daniel Martell did not have his own lawyer present for the court appearance, but Legal Aid Nova Scotia defense counsel Nick Honey represented him for the procedural matters. The reading of the charges was waived, meaning Martell did not have to stand and listen, as each charge was formally read aloud. Senior Crown Prosecutor Bill Gorman informed the court that the Crown had elected to proceed by indictment, rather than summarily. This is a significant decision. Proceeding by indictment means that if Daniel Martell is convicted of these charges, he will face more severe penalties than if the prosecution had proceeded summarily. It signals that the Crown views these as serious offenses, warranting serious consequences. Martell stood in the courtroom looking serious and downcast, his arms at his sides. He did not speak beyond what was minimally required by the court proceedings. The appearance lasted only a few minutes before the hearing was adjourned. Martell's next court appearance is scheduled for March 30th, at which time he is expected to formally retain a lawyer and enter a plea. After the brief court appearance concluded, Martell left the courthouse quickly. His cousin Logan Mackenzie was at his side. Reporters waiting outside attempted to ask Martell questions. They asked him about the charges. They asked if he had anything to say about Lily and Jack. Martell refused to answer most of the questions. But when one reporter pressed him, asking directly whether he thought the charges he was facing had anything to do with the case of the missing children, Martell stopped walking. He turned toward the reporters, and he raised his voice. "I just said they're not related," he said sharply, before striding across the snow-covered parking lot to his vehicle and driving away. Martell's refusal to engage with the media, his visible frustration, and the existence of these serious criminal charges have only intensified public suspicion. But it is critically important to state clearly, Daniel Martell has been charged with these crimes, but he has not been convicted. He is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. The allegations against him are exactly that, allegations. They have not been tested through a trial. They have not been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And the RCMP has explicitly stated that these charges are not directly related to the disappearance of Lily and Jack Sullivan. However, the fact that these alleged offenses occurred in the same household during the same general time period when the children vanished cannot be ignored. It raises profound questions about what kind of environment those children were living in. And through all of this, the central question remains unanswered. Where are Lily and Jack Sullivan? It has now been 10 months since they disappeared. 10 months of searching. 10 months of tips and interviews and investigation. 10 months of their family waiting in agony for answers. 10 months of a grandmother calling for accountability. 10 months of online speculation and media coverage. And still, there is no trace of two young children who should be in school, learning and growing and experiencing childhood. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police have stated that investigators are evaluating all scenarios, including criminality. Staff Sergeant Rob McCammon, who is the acting officer in charge of major crime and behavioral sciences for the Nova Scotia RCMP, has said publicly that no one is currently considered a suspect in the children's disappearance. But the absence of named suspects does not mean that the investigation lacks direction or focus. Police have conducted more than 75 formal interviews with people connected to the case. They have reviewed over 8,000 video files collected from various sources. They have processed over 1,000 tips from the public. They have administered 7 polygraph examinations. They have executed 12 search warrants to seize evidence and gather information. And they continue to work the case actively, even as public frustration grows over the lack of visible progress. Chief Superintendent Dan Morrow, who heads the Nova Scotia RCMP's Criminal Operations Division, has described the case as extremely rare. In a year-end interview, he acknowledged that he had never seen anything quite like it in his career. But he also emphasized that the rarity of the case does not diminish the commitment of investigators to solving it. He explained that major crime investigations must be conducted methodically and carefully. Every piece of evidence must be properly documented and preserved. Every interview must be conducted in accordance with legal standards. Every lead must be followed through completely, even if it ultimately leads nowhere. Rushing the investigation or cutting corners could jeopardize the case if charges are ever filed and the matter goes to trial. Investigators must build a case that will withstand scrutiny, and that takes time. But for the family of Lily and Jack, time is unbearable. Every day without answers is another day of suffering. Belinda Gray, the paternal grandmother, has said that she continues to hold on to hope that the case will be solved and that she will one day know what happened to her grandchildren. But hope becomes more difficult to maintain as the months stretch on. The reward for information leading to the location of Lily and Jack stands at 150,000 Canadian dollars, offered by the province of Nova Scotia. It is a substantial sum of money intended to incentivize anyone with knowledge to come forward. The reward is available to anyone who provides information that leads to finding the children, whether they are found alive or deceased. There are several theories about what might have happened to Lily and Jack, and investigators are almost certainly exploring all of them. The first theory, and the one that police initially appeared to favor, is that the children wandered away from the home on the morning of May the 2nd and became lost in the surrounding woods. This theory is supported by the isolated nature of the location, by Janie McKenzie's statement that she heard the children playing outside around 8:50 a.m., and by the fact that young children can wander surprisingly far in a short period of time, especially in an environment where they might become disoriented. However, this theory is increasingly difficult to sustain in light of the extensive searches that have been conducted. Over 160 volunteers, trained search dogs, helicopters with thermal imaging, and drones have all been deployed. Cadaver dogs specifically trained to detect human remains have searched a 40-kilometer radius. If Lily and Jack had simply gotten lost and died in the woods, it seems almost impossible that no trace of them would have been found. The second theory is that the children were abducted by a stranger. While the property is remote and isolated, it is not impossible for someone to have accessed it. A person familiar with the area, or someone with a specific reason to be there, could potentially have approached the property without being seen. If someone took Lily and Jack, either by force or by luring them away, that would explain why search efforts in the woods have turned up almost no evidence. It would explain why the dogs found no scent trail leading away from the house. However, this theory also has significant weaknesses. There were no reports of suspicious vehicles in the area on May 2nd. There were no witnesses who saw anything unusual. There was no evidence of forced entry into the home. There has been no ransom demand. There has been no credible sighting of the children with an unknown person. Stranger abductions of children, while they do occur, are statistically quite rare. And stranger abductions of two children simultaneously from a home where adults are present are even rarer. The third theory, and the one that many observers believe is most consistent with the available evidence, is that someone within the household knows what happened to Lily and Jack. This theory is supported by several factors. The children were last seen at the home by family members. The adults in the home did not report the children missing until several hours after they were last heard playing outside, a delay that some find suspicious. There are no confirmed sightings of the children leaving the property. The allegations of domestic violence between Malehia and Daniel suggest that the household may have been an unstable or even dangerous environment. The criminal charges now facing Daniel Martell indicate that serious violent offenses were allegedly being committed in that home while the children lived there. And the lack of any significant evidence in the surrounding woods suggests that Lily and Jack may never have actually gone into the woods at all. If someone in the household harmed the children, either intentionally or through some terrible accident, and then concealed what happened, that would explain many of the puzzling aspects of this case. But this theory also faces challenges. There is no physical evidence directly linking anyone in the household to harm against the children. There are no witnesses who saw anything suspicious. The polygraph tests, while not admissible in court and of disputed reliability, have been administered to multiple individuals and have not led to arrests in connection with the children's disappearance. If someone in the household is responsible for what happened to Lily and Jack, they would have had to conceal two bodies so effectively that months of intensive searching have failed to locate them. They would have had to maintain their composure through repeated police interrogations. They would have had to convincingly act as though they had no idea what happened to the children. And they would have had to do all of this while under intense scrutiny from law enforcement and the public. A fourth theory, less frequently discussed but still possible, is that there was some kind of accident involving the children, and that the adults in the household panicked and attempted to cover it up. Tragic accidents do happen, even in homes. Children can fall, can be injured, can suffer medical emergencies. Sometimes, in the immediate aftermath of such an event, people make terrible decisions driven by fear of consequences or by panic. If there was an accident, and if someone attempted to conceal it, that could potentially explain some aspects of the case. But this theory still requires that the children's bodies were hidden so thoroughly that extensive searches have not found them. The truth is that no one outside of the investigation knows with certainty what happened to Lily and Jack Sullivan. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police possess information that has not been made public. They have evidence that has not been disclosed. They have conducted interviews behind closed doors. They have investigative theories that they are not sharing. And they are continuing to work the case actively, following leads and gathering information. Staff Sergeant Rob McCammon has said that he is confident the case will eventually be resolved, that investigators will determine what happened and will find Lily and Jack. But he has also acknowledged that these types of investigations take time, that they must be done carefully and methodically, and that there are no shortcuts. One of the significant challenges facing investigators has been the role of social media and online speculation. The disappearance of Lily and Jack has generated enormous attention on the internet. Thousands of people have joined Facebook groups, Reddit threads, and other online forums dedicated to discussing the case. True crime content creators have made videos analyzing every piece of available information. Amateur sleuths have created detailed timelines, maps, and theories. And while some of this attention has been helpful in keeping the case in the public eye and potentially generating tips, it has also created problems. Misinformation spreads quickly online. Rumors are repeated as facts. People make accusations against individuals without evidence. And all of this noise can actually hamper the investigation. Staff Sergeant McCammon has noted that police have had to spend significant time and resources following up on tips that turned out to be based on nothing more than speculation or comments made on social media. Every tip must be investigated, no matter how it originated, but tips generated from online rumors divert resources away from more productive avenues of inquiry. For Malehia Brooks Murray, the past 10 months have been an unimaginable ordeal. She has lost her two children under circumstances that remain unexplained. She has been interviewed repeatedly by police, each interview probing into painful and personal details of her life. She has had allegations she made about domestic violence become public knowledge through the unsealing of court documents. She has watched as Daniel Martell, the father of her youngest child, was arrested and charged with serious violent crimes. And through all of this, she does not know where Lily and Jack are. She does not know if they are alive or dead. She does not know what happened to them. The psychological toll of such a situation is beyond what most people can comprehend. For Daniel Martell, the past 10 months have also been a nightmare, though of a different kind. He has been the subject of intense public suspicion and online harassment. He has been accused of murdering children, of being a monster, of lying to police. He has maintained his innocence regarding any involvement in the children's disappearance, but he now faces serious criminal charges involving an adult victim. Even if he is ultimately acquitted of those charges, the damage to his reputation may be permanent. Whether he is an innocent man being unfairly vilified, or whether he is guilty of crimes that have not yet been proven, is a question that only the legal system can answer. For Cody Sullivan, the biological father of Lily and Jack, the situation is complicated by years of estrangement. He had not seen his children in the years leading up to their disappearance. When they vanished, he was not part of their daily lives. According to police, he had no involvement in what happened, but he is still their father, and the loss or uncertainty must affect him. His mother, Belinda Gray, has been the public face of the Sullivan family's grief, but Cody himself has remained largely out of the public eye, reportedly finding it too difficult to discuss the situation. And for Belinda Gray, the grandmother, the past 10 months have been a mission. She has refused to let the case fade from public consciousness. She has spoken to media outlets repeatedly. She has called for a public inquiry into the circumstances surrounding the disappearance. She has demanded accountability from the systems and institutions that were supposed to protect her grandchildren. She wants answers. She wants to know what happened. She wants justice, and she wants Lily and Jack to be found, even if the outcome is the worst imaginable. Because not knowing, she has said, is its own form of torture. The province of Nova Scotia's reward of 150,000 Canadian dollars remains in effect. It is open to anyone who provides information that leads to the location of Lily and Jack. The reward is not contingent on the children being found alive. It applies even if the information leads to the discovery of their remains. Tips can be submitted to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police directly or anonymously through Nova Scotia Crime Stoppers. The hope is that someone, somewhere, knows something. Perhaps someone saw something on May 2nd that seemed insignificant at the time, but is actually crucial. Perhaps someone heard a conversation, or noticed unusual behavior, or possesses knowledge that they have been reluctant or afraid to share. The reward is designed to overcome that hesitation, to provide both an incentive and a mechanism for people to come forward. As of today, March 3rd, 2026, 10 months and 1 day after Lily and Jack Sullivan were reported missing, there is no resolution to this case. The children have not been found. No one has been charged in connection with their disappearance. The investigation continues, but publicly, there are no apparent breakthroughs. Daniel Martell awaits his next court appearance on March 30th regarding the criminal charges he faces involving an adult complainant. Malehia Brooks Murray is living somewhere away from the intense media glare, trying to cope with the loss of her children and the disintegration of her life. Cody Sullivan continues to deal with the disappearance of children he had been estranged from for years. And Belinda Gray continues her advocacy, refusing to let the world forget about Lily and Jack. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police have asked anyone with information to come forward. Tips can be provided anonymously. The substantial reward offers a powerful incentive, and the need for answers is profound and urgent. 2 children deserve to be found. Their family deserves to know what happened. The community deserves closure, and if a crime was committed, the person or persons responsible deserve to be held accountable under the law. This case raises important questions that extend beyond the specific circumstances of Lily and Jack's disappearance. It raises questions about child protection systems and whether warning signs were recognized and acted upon. It raises questions about how missing persons investigations are classified and conducted, and whether the decision to initially treat this as a non-criminal matter may have affected the investigation's trajectory. It raises questions about domestic violence, about how it is identified and addressed, and about the risks it poses not just to adult victims, but to children who live in homes where violence occurs. It raises questions about the challenges of investigating disappearances in remote, difficult terrain. And it raises questions about the role of social media and the public in demanding accountability while also respecting the legal process and the presumption of innocence. If anything can be learned from this tragic case, It is that children can vanish, even in circumstances where it seems impossible. It is that extensive searches do not always yield answers. It is that investigations can be frustratingly slow and complex, but that speed and simplicity are not always compatible with thoroughness and justice. It is that allegations of domestic violence should be taken seriously as potential indicators of broader danger within a household. It is that the truth can remain hidden for months or years, but that persistence and proper investigative technique can sometimes uncover it eventually. And it is that hope, painful though it may be, is what sustains families of missing persons, because accepting that they will never know is simply unbearable. Lily Sullivan would be 7 years old now if she is still alive. Jack Sullivan would be 5, soon to turn 6. They should be in school. They should be learning to read and write. They should be making friends, playing games, experiencing the joys and challenges of childhood. They should be with their family, safe and loved and cared for. They should have futures stretching out before them, full of possibility and promise. Instead, they are missing. And until they are found, or until the investigation definitively reveals what happened to them, the case of Lily and Jack Sullivan will remain one of the most troubling unsolved mysteries in recent Canadian history, a reminder of how vulnerable children can be and how important it is that we as a society do everything in our power to protect them. If you have any information about the disappearance of Lily and Jack Sullivan, please contact the Royal Canadian Mounted Police immediately. You can reach the Northeast Nova RCMP Major Crime Unit at 902-896-5060. You can also contact Nova Scotia Crime Stoppers toll-free at 1-800-222-8477, submit a secure web tip at crimestoppers.ns.ca, or use the P3 Tips mobile app. Tips can be submitted anonymously. A reward of 150,000 Canadian dollars is available for information that leads to locating the children. Every piece of information, no matter how small or insignificant it may seem to you, could be the key to solving this case. 2 children are missing. A family is waiting for answers. And somewhere, someone knows something. That someone could be you. Thank you for watching this investigation. If you found this coverage informative and respectful, please subscribe to Forensic Disconnect for more in-depth investigations into cases that deserve to be remembered and that deserve justice. Hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below, but please keep your comments respectful and factual. Speculation and accusation help no one. What we need are facts, evidence, and people with real information coming forward to authorities. Remember, these are not characters in a story. These are real children, a real family, and a real ongoing tragedy. Lily and Jack Sullivan deserve to be found. Their story deserves to be told with the seriousness and respect it demands. And the truth, whatever it may be, deserves to be brought into the light.